Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR, and I'm your host, the counselor. Today, we're going to talk about something that is rather concerning, and it's happening all over the world, and it's something that is upsetting society in such a way that we feel that we're powerless. And it's understandably so. And the reason why I'm doing this podcast is because something actually disturbed me as of late, and it's the case of Devontae Miller in Toronto. And what happened was two off duty police officers claim he was trying to break into their cars, which was a bunch of garbage. But, anyways, the whole point is they ended up beating this young man so bad that they took his eye, and they were police officers. And they're off duty, and they came with some bull. They tried to hide the case, and it's just another example of police brutality. And the truth be told, it's happening here in Canada, just like it is in the States. Unfortunately, we don't have advocates to speak up in the black community because a lot of them are afraid. And the reason why they're afraid is very good reason. Because 90% of those killings in the high density, low economic areas is because it's called revenge killing. And these young men who go out and shoot each other and shoot at families and shoot at children in parks, they have issues with each other, and it threatens the community, and the community dare not talk. We don't have witness protection in this country to protect people who would come up. So why would you step forward? So there's not really a good relationship between many blacks and the police. Understandably so. Like I said, we hide it very well. Matter of fact, we really don't hide it very well. It's sickening to know what's going on in Canada. We talk about First Nations, but if we just are talking about Black Lives Matter, period, it's atrocious what's going on even in this country. It's a pathetic state here in Canada. And the truth being told is the Caucasians who are in power, unfortunately, are exerting this power on blacks even here in Canada. And they are doing it through the law. So what happened was they beat this boy down, and it was just in public sight where this courtroom drama was being played out. And unfortunately, this young man did get um, one of the officers charged. They let the other brother go. It's despicable. They're police officers, inexcusable, but there's no accountability. Anyways, he beat this young man and he lost his eye. And they decided that they were going to charge the officer and give him 9 months. But on top of that, they gave him bail, which means he didn't do any time. They let him out. He was charged because he's a police officer and they're corrupt, and that's just a clear case. And I'm sorry, sounds like the same old song, but what else could you call it? I guess if you're in power and they wonder why things are the way they are. And I would say that a lot of people would say, well, you know what? You can't really label all police officers like that. It's really not fair. And I say that's garbage. Because if you're in a police force, you should be held accountable, and you should be holding your officers accountable. And I don't mean just giving them charges and then letting them walk. Now, he's off on 9 months. So basically, once you give them bail, that's just an indication you're not really doing anything. You're not going to give them any time. And the relationship between police and the black community has been strained. The courts, honestly, are not functioning well. The police, you if you're in the States, you're going to know what I'm talking about. And you're going to know that there's a lot of manipulation going on. And unfortunately, it's called the truth. And the truth is that, yes, there are people that get in trouble legitimately and they do some bad things. But I think excessively when they're in power, it's just gotten out of control. And like I said, here in the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, they have SIU, and it's a joke. It's like they investigate, they get on TV and they say they're going to investigate. Nobody in the public knows what's really going on. They're the results because they're powerless. It's just basically a mockery of the criminal justice system. It's pathetic. It needs a major overhaul. But unfortunately, we don't have the type of leadership in this country that we need, and we're probably not going to get it for a long time. So, like I said, with the whole system in place, these areas that have these shootings going on, obviously the police, they could go in there and do a lot. They could change up the system, but they like it the way it is. The court here in this country is basically a machine. It's a money making machine where lawyers swap spit with each other, judges shake hands, they all come up with some garbage, and there's really no justice going on. And that's the truth. And it's sad, it's pathetic, but as a developed country, we should be ashamed of ourselves. This is aside for politics. But that just is one case that I'm talking about. And I'm really concerned. And I think we have to talk about ways that you can avoid this police brutality because it is real. And it's not just black community, but it's just so substantial. And over here, if it makes you feel, if you're not only just watching television, if you're experiencing some of these experiences, it makes people out, they feel helpless. And it's just sad. And I don't care. I think Canada could be a much better country. But like I said, the people who are in it close their eyes because everybody's out for themselves, especially in the court system. It's a joke. When the judges see that there's cases that are clear cut, they don't even make a decision. Why? They procrastinate, they delay. It's the process. It's always an excuse. And what happens is obviously if you keep putting things over, just ridiculousness. And people are making money, lawyers are making money. It's just a game, and it's unfortunate because there's so much terrible atrocities going on inside the courtroom. Even the police officers that are running rampant, they need a lot of change, but it's all talk. It's not real. So I can understand young people and people of color having their experiences, but I think we're at the extreme level. And I think what we need to do is spend a couple podcasts trying to ensure that you have some of your rights and you know when it comes to police brutality what you can do. See, police brutality is excessive or unnecessary force against civilian, and force is deemed excessive when it goes well beyond what is necessary to handle in a particular situation. Police brutality most obviously includes physical harm, but it could also include psychological intimidation, false arrest, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, police corruption, racial profiling, political repression, and inappropriate use of tasers. It has been going on for decades, and I'm telling you, in this country, it will continue to go on. In the States, they have their problems. Maybe we're not protesting because, I don't know, we're just so complacent. And no one really wants to talk about it. In this country, it's sad. As soon as you say the word racism, people get their backs up. Of course they will. Because a lot of them that are in power don't want to look at themselves. So they don't. You can't even mention it. They're not going to do anything about it. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that you pay attention, right? And I'm not just talking about in the United States. I'm talking about wherever you are. You're going to have to pay attention to these podcasts. See, like when you get pulled over, you got to know when you're being followed by a police officer. And I can tell you from personal experience, I do recall driving one evening, and I had a family member um, in a car with me, and we were driving down the street, and the officer pulled up right beside me, and he looked at my family member, and then he followed us. And then when he followed us, he he pulled in behind us and then pulled us over and gave us some rigmarole. Anyways, this was a few years back. The point being is that it was really harassment, and I ended up going to court. And the officer admitted, yeah, I pulled him over. She looked familiar, and made the accusation that the family member was a prostitute that he had seen. So he felt it was in his right to pull over, right? To pull over. And see, you're probably saying, well, wait a minute. Why would the officer just pull you over? Because back then they wanted to give the breathalyzer test. And I'm like, wait a second. I asked, I said, hey, why are you pulling me over? And he says, you know what? I smell alcohol. And I said, no, you don't. And he goes, yes, I do. So I got out, right? And in the end, and I'm way, like, I'm hours from where I live. I'm visiting a family member from out of town. And so back then you didn't have, you actually had the right to say, no, I'm not taking a breathalyzer test. I don't feel you pulled me over. I just want to know why you pulled me over. So in that exchange, I was arrested, brought to jail. And unfortunately, I had to go to court, and I felt like, you know what? I did win the case, but I thought it's just so blatant. And how could you even go on a stand and testify that you stopped me because you seen a family member who looked like a prostitute and you decided to follow me? And then you pull this drinking, and this is real. And I mean, my case is light compared to a number of people. And it doesn't matter the education that you may have. These are things that you have to put up with. And I can't even believe some of the things that do happen. So, but I just think it's gotten to a blatant point where it's just outright ridiculous. And it's just being covered. And I think that if we look at the criminal justice system, even if we look at the prison system, what they do is they take our teenage boys and they throw them in with these old men, and the old men beat the shit out of them, and then half these kids get out and they get back in the streets and they've been treated like crap. So it's just ridiculous. They don't even have separation from even the adults who see some of the kids out there who should not be in with them, but obviously we don't really care. There's no difference. So that's what happens. And then just some of the things that happen. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, right? Um, but let's focus on what you can do. Let's say, for example, is when you do drive down the road, know when to stop when a police car is following you. You do not need to stop every time there is a police car behind you on the road. However, when a police car is following you with its lights flashing or siren blaring, that is a clear indication that you do need to stop. Right? So you're going to have to pull over safely. And when you realize that there is a police car behind you with lights flashing or sounding, and you pull over in a safe manner, and do it in a way that does not annoy an already annoyed, angry police officer. And I know that sounds a little presumptuous, but what I mean is you should use your turn signals to indicate lane changes, and you should stop quickly, but not so quickly that the cop has to immediately brake to avoid hitting the car. Just take your time and move over. And there are a number of us, for some reason, when we get pulled over, we're always, there's something that goes on in our head that says, you know what, oh no, what's up now? Even if you're not even really clear why you're being pulled over, right? For what reason? But just do it in a safe manner. Avoid delaying, because some of us, we keep driving on and on and on, and just to sometimes they'll find an appropriate spot to pull over, but some of us take a little bit long because we're just like, could be little things that are going on, but pulling over quickly is also important, because doing so means that there's a greater chance that you will recall the details of the violation that the cop later accuses you of committing, right? So if you pull over quickly, you'll be close to the place where the alleged violation took place, so that you can return there if necessary in order to evaluate for yourself the police officer's specific claims about the violation, right? Like, this will be helpful. And you want to allay the police officer's fear. After stopping, and as a police officer is walking towards your car, you should do certain things that will allay the common fears that police officers have when approaching a car that they have just pulled over. Police officers are routinely killed during ordinary traffic stops. So understand where those fears come from. To allay those fears, you can engage in token gestures such as rolling down your window all the way, turning off your engine, placing your hands on the steering wheel, and turning on the interior light if it is dark. And if you got nothing to worry about, then this is quite routine. Avoid rummaging through your pockets or glove compartment immediately unless asked to. You may know, of course, that during a routine traffic stop, the police officer will begin their conversation with you by asking you for your license and your registration. However, do not look for those items until the officer asks for them, because if you start rummaging through your back pocket or glove compartment, the officer may think that you are reaching for a weapon. And I suggest at this point that what you do is, if you have time, if you have your cell phone close to you, right? Then you just put it on record. All cell phones have the record function. Record the incident and the interaction. So what you say, what they say. So, if you can, confirm the police officer's identity if necessary. If you're not sure whether the person who stopped you is actually a police officer, like if you are stopped by an unmarked car and you are concerned for your safety, politely ask for the officer's ID and badge. And if you're still concerned, you can ask the police officer that he allow you to follow him to a police station, or that he call a supervisor to the scene. These are your rights. Whether they do it or not, you can request it and later on state, I did make the request, it was denied. So that is something that you can do. And this could all be recorded. If you don't have a phone, you still can make these requests. And you can simply say, hey, you came in an unmarked car. I'm not sure. Concerned. I'm not sure. And there are no assumptions. Just go with what your rights are. Avoid giving the police officer a reason to be suspicious. And you can give the police officer a reason to search your car by attempting to hide something or throwing something out of your car window. Such actions will give them a reason to search your car. The officer will also be watching your body movement. So a sudden lowering of the shoulders may suggest to him that you are trying to hide something under your seat. Now, why are we talking about this? We're talking about this is because we're really going in the mind of the police officer, what they're thinking, not just what you're doing, but what they're thinking. So when they're approaching, all the things that could be going through their mind. Remember, they're coming up in a situation that they're unfamiliar with. So there could be a number of things. And based on what they encounter when they see you, I don't know, like some of them might see a black person and get disgruntled or have an attitude, or may not, but they might feel, oh, what, this is stereotypical, so let's approach it in this extra cautious way. And remember, we are portrayed on the news daily. And are we guilty in some instances? Yes. There are young black people out there that are guilty of doing certain things, just like every other culture. However, the emphasis, right, seems to be daily. It's whatever gets people's attention, right? So they highlight. It's so funny. Like even today in 2020, when you look at the news, you'll see when it's so funny when they say black, they'll say, oh, black male, short hair, this. But even today, when it comes to describing white folks, it'll be short hair, mustache. But it doesn't really say Caucasian white male, right? They might say darker skin, or lighter skin, but they never emphasize. And it's so strategic. It's so sad, but it's so strategic. Sometimes they'll place the picture, but I would tell you, really do a little test. Go on the news and take a paper and do a checklist of all the images of the criminals that are being portrayed. Unless they're high profile, can't get away with it, criminals like those ones that are doing that serial killing, like, you know what I mean, like MacArthur here, then that's hard to hide. But other than that, a lot of it is just talk. But even the other day, I saw a teenager being put on the news, like, the name, and they usually don't do that, but they're doing it, and that's really violating rights as a young person. And they're even doing that in the media. I don't know why people don't really hold the media accountable. I really think they should. I think they should challenge them, because they're complicit in some of this stereotypical behavior, especially when it comes to police brutality. But a lot of times we're coming from the victim role, and it makes sense, because if you don't feel you have power, you're going to be coming from that perspective, right? So You just want to try to avoid. I know it's almost impossible in certain situations, but a lot of times you could go into, you could be confrontational, but sometimes just keep it simple. Listen to the officer's instructions about getting out of the car if you're asked. I know a lot of them go, well, why should I get out the car? Look, it sometimes just the officer has the reasons to ask. If you got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried about it. That's what a lot of people say, but I think you should be worried about it. Just if you can pull over, a lot of people pull over in lighted areas where there's public. Not that the public's always going to do anything, but they do. So they do have the right to ask you to step outside your car, and that if they feel it's necessary. Only get out of your car if the car asks you to. Many officers prefer that you stay seated in your car and will command you to stop getting out of your car if you begin to do so. If you get out of the car without being asked or despite being asked to stay seated, the officer may point a gun at you. So you don't want to go, some of you want to jump right out the car and say, hey, I got nothing. This, that. We're not doing that. It's a procedural way of thinking. So they're thought procedurally, right? And in steps and phases. They're trained to think procedurally. So you want to act that way if you can. And we're just trying to be compliant. I'm trying to give you the basics that you should be doing. Because some get excited, some get nervous. And they get up, hey officer, and start approach. Wrong. Don't do that. The officer may believe that you're about to flee or use a weapon if you get out without being asked, because officers are trained to expect the worst. They are trained because they don't know what's going on, and you could be a criminal. There's officers being killed out there too every year. And are all officers bad? No. But what I'm saying is, if you have officers who are bad in your precinct, it's a reputation that smears all of you, and you should be standing up to say, you know what, it's not acceptable. But I couldn't work in a career where I'm seeing this behavior go on where it's just ridiculous. A lot of people do, like I said, um, each his own. You just got to know your rights regarding police searches. Normally, a police officer cannot search your vehicle if you are pulled over, nor can they search your home without a warrant. Your actions and words, however, can instill a reasonable suspicion in the police officer's mind that you are armed and dangerous or are hiding something illegal. If the police officer has reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, he or she is legally entitled to conduct a search. Now, that's very subjective. And when I say that, think about it, right? Um, Reasonable suspicion. Oh, we use that all the time. Oh, I had reasonable suspicions. And a lot of times that term is used to violate your rights. Reasonable. See, that's the language. Reasonable. And what's reasonable to one person like you and me might not be reasonable to them. And a lot of the times, obviously, the courts are going to listen to them. But reasonable suspicion, they can rest on that. So even if the officer does not have probable cause or reasonable suspicion, the officer may still take from you any illegal objects that are in plain view, like open alcohol containers or illegal drugs. A lot of times, if they see that, they'll try to confiscate the car. They don't necessarily want to take the items out of them. But if these illegal items are in plain view, the officer can open your car door and collect them. In the course of doing so, they may seize any additional illegal objects that they come across. If the police officer has reasonable suspicion that you are involved in criminal activity, they can search your car. And if they have reasonable suspicion that you are armed and dangerous, they can be patting you down. And I'm telling you, they can pat you down. And I've actually seen people try to undress a person in public, not just pat them down, make them take off their certain clothes, and it's just degrading, despicable behavior, and they need to change a lot of that. But I've heard of people doing that. It's a big violation. But I guess when you use reasonable suspicion, right, then that term covers everything. If you and the police officer end up going to the police station together, like if they end up arresting you or the passengers in the car, they may also search your car, right? If your car is then towed, the police may also conduct an inventory search afterwards, even if there is no reason to believe that there is anything illegal inside the car. So obviously the police officers, they do have a right. So you need to know, and I know this is gonna sound a little biased, but you're gonna need to know the right things to say. So whenever you speak to a police officer, no matter why you were detained, it is important to know what you should and should not say. Saying the wrong thing can be the difference between losing and winning a case against a police officer. Now, what you do need to know is that they are enforcers. They enforce the law. So if you do start talking and telling them a story, see, a lot of people try to tell a story. They do. Let me just, because they got this perception. It's unfamiliar territory, but they got this perception that if you tell the officer a story, they're going to change their mind or let you go or not. They're enforcers. And depending on how they're feeling, if you give them information, it could be used against you in court. So they're enforcers. They're not judges. So you just know right now, if you start talking too much and saying too much, you're giving yourself up, or you're giving yourself away, or you might incriminate yourself, um, and it will be used against you. So that statement that they use on you, we don't take it too serious, and we should take it. And that's why I say do not talk back to the officer, but just know one thing: you have the right to ask for a lawyer. Okay, and I really suggest that if you, especially if you get arrested, don't try and tell a story even on the scene. Say, keep it straight. Do not talk back to the officer. Although you may have a legitimate belief that you have a right to stand up for your rights by talking back to the police officer may perceive you're talking back to them as a challenge to their authority. And remember, you could be 100% right. You could be stopped illegally, or they could be asserting their power over you, and you could be right, but you're not going to be able to prove that on the scene. So you got to keep your cool, and you got to know and keep it simple. And you know what? The truth is that as simple as you keep it, I've known brothers that follow the law, sisters that follow the law, and it does not matter. But we are still going through this exercise, so some of you young people out there know that what the expectations are. And I know that there's brothers and sisters out there that have followed these recommendations that I am saying to the T, and it did not matter, and their lives were ended. And that is not an extreme case. But we still have to go through this for the young people to let them know what to expect, because it's sad, it's terrible, it's degrading, it's despicable, but it is happening, right? So talking back is not going to get you anywhere. If anything, be cool, be the listener, the observer, and just follow step by step what the authority is. And I'll tell you, I've been stopped. And I remember I was stopped one time, and the truth be told, the officer, it was a dead end street, and they asked me, this is what they said. They said, we heard that you were breaking into some houses. And I said, what? And I go, that's not true. And he says, yeah, well, this, that, boy, this, that. And see, right there, I came back with a response. And it wasn't a good response. You know what I mean? And it actually started to escalate the situation. Now, remember, I was at a dead end street, and I was going to escalate the situation if I wanted to, but they were getting a little hyped up. So I actually had to look at the situation and go, wait a minute. It's nighttime. I really didn't do anything. And I know they're giving me this excuse, which is a common excuse. I heard someone tell me this. And then when I said, and I challenged it, I said, well, who's those someone? Could you give me the information so that I can write it down? And then that's when it started getting out of control. See, you got to understand your environment, your current situation, and you got to understand what you're dealing with. And I think what has to happen is you have to try your best to keep your cool and understand that the situation could get out of control. And it could drastically turn. Now, what happened in that situation is I had good perception, and I started to see, as right as I am, it's not going to matter here. So I kept my cool, and I just listened, and I let them ramble on for a minute. And I didn't even say anything. I let them ramble on, and I said to myself, "Yeah, you know what? Um, not complex thinkers." And I could go and walk circles around them cognitively and with my words. But at the end of the day, that's not going to do anything. That's not going to be effective because they're enforcers and they got to have the power and they got to feel the power. Now, are all police officers on this negativity? No, I can't give excuses, but we're talking about what a lot of them are doing, asserting that power. They're not complex thinkers. So they're very instruction oriented, right? Procedural oriented. And when you challenge the authority, you have to be aware of the consequences. So if you speak in a tone that the police officer finds unacceptable, you may find yourself being charged with disorderly conduct or disturbing the peace. Such a tone may also lead eventually to an incident of police brutality. So it's in your best interest to be polite in your conversations with the police, whether you're in your home, in public, or when you have been pulled over in your car. As I mentioned, there are extreme situations. However, this is how you should follow procedurally in your behavior because it can turn to police brutality, especially if, see, the words are powerful. See, I don't even understand when that saying is, um, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. They want us to believe that, but it doesn't really apply, especially to police officers. You say something, some of them might trip. I mean, some of them will lose it. They'll put that extra force on you or beat you upside your head. They will do that if you keep carrying on because they got to be in charge, right? That's what the thing is. It's not going to matter later on. You know what I mean? Your lawyer might get you off, but if you got a bump on your head that it ain't never going to heal, it won't really matter. So you got to know your rights. You got to know when you start talking. I'm not saying be a punk. That's street talk. I'm saying if you don't got to say too much, don't say it. Because understand what you're dealing with, right? You're sitting up there with your mouth and they got a gun. You got to know the math. The math is simple, right? Run your mouth, right? End up south, 6 feet under. You got to know that that's the real deal. You got to know what you're dealing with. So I'm just letting you know, should everybody be afraid? Black? Yeah, I think you should be at least aware, not just afraid. I think you need to be aware of the situation. And a lot of people are like, oh man, nah. I'm not saying be a punk. I'm saying be proper in your observations and in your mind. Think about what you're dealing with. You're not empowered. All right? And it's not going to help anybody. And yes, there are situations, many situations where it doesn't really matter, but we got to get with the commonality of how do we proceed in certain situations. And we do. We can control a lot of these situations by not playing into the cognitive deficiencies that may be in that person's mind, right? Simple to them, right? That, oh, I can be challenged and I can win that challenge. So if they got that in their mind because I'm the authority, I'm the police, I tell you, then you got to go, okay, wait a minute. I can think through this thing. In most cases, in 90% of the cases, I'm not going to agitate the situation. I'm going to understand my rights. I don't know how many of you understand your rights, but there are certain things that you should do and you should not do, right? Like, believe it or not, you should not speak first. Avoid asking, what's the problem? See, when you do that, right, it gives them another reason. What's the problem? Right? Be cool. That defensive opening question, uh, that allows the officer to start talking, right? At you, not to you. So allow the officer to start talking first, just to see. Remember, I told you, be the observer, get the information. Don't just react. Don't be so emotional if you can help it. I know some of us get nervous, but if you ain't really doing anything, you should not really be nervous. You should learn. I didn't really do anything. But for what's going on out there, we can keep going through that over and over and over, and we understand why a lot of people are nervous, right? Right? But if you are being pulled over, do not ask the officer why you were being stopped. Just comply with the initial instructions, which will likely be for you to provide them with your license and registration, right? You can ask them, but what I'm saying, build a little bit of observation skills and see what's going on. What are they telling you? And if they're not telling you after you do a little bit of communication, they're not telling you, then you can ask them once you're listening to see what they're saying. Let them let you know what's going on. You can say, hey, after the listen first. That's what I'm saying, right? Give non-committal answers. If asked, do you know why I stopped you? Reply, no. If you're asked, do you know how fast you were going? Reply, yes, I do. By asking you these questions, the cop is trying to extract an admission out of you to use in court if necessary. Therefore, your answer should be non-committal and brief. If the officer then tells you how fast you were going, give a non-committal answer like, I see, or simply remain silent because the silence is not an admission of guilt and cannot be used against you in court. All right. And the thing is, too, I told you, if you got a cell phone, record this stuff. But see, the truth is, I remember being pulled over even recently. And there was a truck going fast, and I was behind this truck doing a regular speed. So they let this transport truck go by me. And then they scanned me. And I knew, oh no. So as soon as I got pulled over, I made the mistake. And I really didn't really make a mistake. It's just common thoughts in your head that go, I'm gonna question it. So what I did was I said, hey, listen, they said, oh, you were speeding. I said, no, unfortunately I wasn't. I said, you know what? Can I see your your speed gun? See what it says? Because if I just did it, could you show me? No, I don't have to show you. See, right there is where you go, wow. Right? But you can't fight it there. Like, it doesn't matter. Like I said, they're enforcers. So if they're enforcers, they're not really looking to negotiate. And 99.9%, I'd even say 100% of the cases, you're not going to negotiate it there. So why try? Take your ticket, move on, fight it. Let the lawyers do the work. It's a machine, people. It's all about the money. It's about the Benjamins. It's a court system. So you trying to fight it on the side of the road does not make sense, right? There's agencies that will fight your tickets and bring it. Like, we got to remember that. I know we get upset, we get hyped up, but unfortunately, you are trying to plead a case, and I know the odd occasion where there's people out there that might have the officer, oh, they just let me go, I had a little talk and they let me go. If they've already committed to charging you, and even if they haven't, be a quiet observer. Just keep it simple, non-committal answers. Keep it brief. And you know what? Take it to court if you need to. Don't try to convince them, let you off, especially if they're, oh, yeah. And if you start challenging them right there, it's just going to get out of control. So be cool. Learn to be cool. And learn what you can do. And this is why we're talking about it. See, we're going to do part 2. And this is where I say I want to thank my listeners, because a lot of you are going to have some thoughts going through your mind. Oh, well, I will do this or I will do that. Well, you can do whatever you want to do, but I'm telling you the basics of what you should do and what's going to maybe keep you calm and keep your mind right and actually get you through. You know what I mean? Because what you want to do is that it's at a point where we got to learn to get through, and we got to learn to advocate. Yes, we got to learn to change some policies, but we also got to learn how to go about reacting and responding in certain situations, and we have to get a little bit into their mindset, right? If necessary, and know our rights. It's important to know your rights. And even when your rights are violated, I think if you take a certain approach and you prepare yourself, see, the prepared mind is always the best. Understanding if you didn't do anything and you are clearly within your rights, that you could challenge it for sure. But I really recommend that you let the courts do that because, like I said, you're dealing with enforcers, and that is what's happening. So try to play it cool so that they can stay cool, right? That's it. And just know your rights, the basics that we're talking about. If you're feeling uncomfortable, you're not feeling safe, ask for a sergeant on the scene. There's certain things you could do for your safety. Get the cell phone on record. Maybe tap into a friend. Hi, I'm being pulled over. Just let you know. These are just safety precautions. And you do need to do that, right? Especially if you're a person of color, if you're black, right? I'm sorry. It's the truth. There's no sense lying to yourself. There's attitudes. There's young people being mistreated in certain areas of the law that is ridiculous. It's beyond belief. But I don't know. I guess it's another oppressive way to do it. And a lot of people say, hey, you know what? Why is the police all the enemy and this, that? No, they're not all the enemy. But if they've got certain behaviors going on in this forest and it's really impacting communities in a negative way, then there's a problem. We can't pick and choose. Just like they don't pick and choose when they lay a blanket across all black people and start saying certain things or act a certain way towards us, then we're not going to engage in foolishness. We're going to say, if it's happening in your station, right, then it's running rampant. And if it's bringing those young people to the street where they're being called monkeys and being played slave music in cars and being brutalized and beat up, and yeah, it's happening. People don't want to talk about it, but it's happening. Public doesn't care. All they know is, oh, there's a criminal, there's a shooter there on the TV. So that community, and it just spreads. So what I'm saying is, we got to do our part, and we got to start understanding the basics. And once we understand the basics, we can move from there. But I think it's a little bit about education at this point. And we'll talk about the advocacy a little bit later. But we're just talking about certain situations that you are in control of until it gets out of control. So that's the end of part one. And I want to say, be like the wise old bird and spread the word, because this is what's going on. All right. Until we talk again in part two. And remember, it's all about you, right? And what you could be going through. And if you're not going through it, good for you. It isn't that you're so good. It might be your circumstances. It might be, right, what you've been born with, privilege, right? We know it's different for different people. And it's sad, but it's true. And the real terrible part is when it's on video and people can see blatantly what's going on, and they ain't gonna do nothing. It's not them. That's your problem. I see people over here, right? You try to talk to them about what's going on, they don't even want to talk about it, right? So we're talking about it. Anyways, join me for part two later.